Human communication arrays detected the signal during routine monitoring. The message was flagged as a priority foreign transmission. Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the data while his ship patrolled the Martian orbital zone. He saw cities burning and civilians being captured. His response was operational rather than diplomatic. He transmitted acknowledgement and updated coordinates within 8 minutes. 3 ships changed course toward Kepler 442b immediately. The quantum message exposed a fundamental division in galactic values. Advanced civilizations prioritized procedure over action. They valued legal frameworks above immediate needs. Their responses were measured, conditional, and delayed. Humanity's reaction was instinctive and unconditional. They saw suffering and moved to alleviate it without calculating costs or benefits. This difference would redefine interstellar relations for centuries. The transmission became a historical turning point. It demonstrated that technological advancement didn't guarantee moral clarity. Some species had grown so comfortable with safety that they forgot how to protect others. Their inaction created space for a different kind of civilization to emerge, one that remembered what truly mattered when lives were at stake. The message's failure elsewhere highlighted humanity's unique sense of responsibility. This single communication sparked the intervention that would change the galaxy. It revealed the Federation's moral bankruptcy while demonstrating humanity's readiness to act. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. One group debated while another moved. One valued process while another valued lives. The quantum transmission became a test that 53 worlds failed and 1 passed. Its simple plea would echo through history as both condemnation and inspiration. The Galactic Federation Council chamber hummed with perfect climate control. Delegates from 53 worlds sat in ergonomic chairs around a circular table. Holographic displays showed the Voron invasion in real time. Cities burned on Kepler 442b while discussion continued. Ambassador Thexmore stood patiently as procedural objections were raised. His evidence was clear and uncompromising. The response was anything but. The Altarian representative adjusted her silver robes. She spoke of her people's philosophical enlightenment. They had transcended violence centuries ago through disciplined meditation. She expressed sympathy for the Zilani suffering. Then she cited their foundational principle of non-intervention. Her words were elegant and logically consistent. They provided no help to the dying civilization. The crystalline collective's envoy glowed softly as it processed the request. Its voice emerged through translators with machine-like precision. It explained its species was bound by core programming directives. These protocols prohibited any action that might harm another being. Even defensive intervention violated their fundamental code. The delegate offered post-conflict humanitarian assistance. This meant nothing to those currently under attack. Admiral Cathvar studied the tactical displays with professional detachment. His analysis focused on resource allocation and risk assessment. He noted the Voron fleet composition and orbital superiority. His report concluded that intervention would require significant fleet assets. The projected losses outweighed any strategic benefit. He recommended monitoring and preparing defensive measures. His concerns were purely mathematical. Other military advisors supported Cathvar's position. They emphasized the potential for conflict escalation across sectors. Each representative prioritized their own world security. Some suggested the Zilani should have developed better defenses. Others questioned whether they provoked the Voron invasion. The debate cycled through endless procedural considerations. Legal experts analyzed jurisdictional boundaries and treaty obligations. They debated whether the Zilani qualified for protection under interstellar law. Some argued the Voron might have legitimate territorial claims. Others expressed concern about setting dangerous precedents. The discussion continued for 36 hours without resolution. The Council ordered additional intelligence gathering. They formed subcommittees to study long-term diplomatic solutions. Some members suggested sending observers to document events. Military assets remained docked and powered down. The decision-making process valued caution over compassion. Their inaction revealed a fundamental flaw in Federation values. They possessed the most advanced technology in known space. Their warships could have ended the invasion within hours. Yet they lacked the moral conviction to deploy them. Their societies had grown so accustomed to safety that they forgot how to defend others. This hesitation would be remembered as their greatest failure. It demonstrated that advanced technology meant nothing without the courage to use it properly. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations chose comfort over compassion. Their inaction created an opportunity for others to prove what true strength looked like. The Council's debate continued while extinction proceeded unimpeded. Federation databases classified Earth as a death world. The designation denoted planets with consistently lethal environmental conditions. Human civilization developed under constant evolutionary pressure. Gravity was 20% higher than galactic average. Atmospheric composition included toxic elements in trace amounts. Seasonal extremes produced temperature variations that would kill most species. Predatory fauna remained a constant threat even after technological advancement. Human resilience was forged through generations of hardship. Their biology maintained high adrenaline production as baseline function. Pain tolerance exceeded standard measures by 40%. Healing processes operated at accelerated rates compared to other species. Psychological profiles showed exceptional adaptability to trauma and loss. These traits were evolutionary responses to their hostile environment. The willingness to die for strangers stemmed from this legacy. Human history was a continuous survival narrative. Their social structures emphasized collective security over individual preservation. Military doctrines valued objective completion above personnel safety. This cultural framework was incomprehensible to species from protected worlds. Federation analysts misinterpreted it as primitive recklessness. Galactic elites saw only technological lack. They noted the absence of energy shields and advanced propulsion. Their assessments focused on hardware rather than human factors. They dismissed projectile weapons as antiquated and ineffective. Medical technology appeared centuries behind standard practices. These superficial observations created a critical blind spot. They failed to understand death world conditioning. Humans operated with different risk calculations. Their decision-making incorporated variables others couldn't quantify. Persistence was not a choice but an ingrained biological response. Survival instincts were honed through millennia of constant threat. This produced tactical flexibility that doctrine couldn't replicate. The underestimation became the Federation's strategic error. They expected humans to withdraw under heavy losses. Instead, casualties increased their determination. Setbacks triggered adaptive responses rather than retreat. The Voran encountered opponents who fought harder when outnumbered. Their psychological warfare tactics produced opposite effects. Humanity's origin became their ultimate weapon. Their evolutionary history provided advantages technology couldn't match. Endurance allowed them to sustain combat operations indefinitely. Resilience enabled recovery from injuries that would incapacitate others. Adaptability let them turn disadvantages into opportunities. These traits were invisible to standard military analysis. The galaxy learned that true power was forged in adversity. Comfortable civilizations lost the capacity for sacrifice. Their technological sophistication created dependency rather than strength. Safety eroded the willingness to take necessary risks. Human intervention demonstrated that advanced technology meant little without the courage to use it. Deathworld legacy redefined galactic power calculations. Military analysts began incorporating psychological factors into assessments. Species started re-evaluating their own evolutionary histories. The Federation revised their planetary classification systems. Human traits were now studied as strategic advantages rather than curiosities. This understanding came too late for the Voran. They had prepared for technological superiority but not psychological resistance. Their defeat became a case study in miscalculating opponent capabilities. Future conflicts would need to account for these intangible factors. The rules of engagement had permanently changed. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or ships. It was their unwavering commitment to protect others. This quality could not be manufactured or replicated. It came from generations of overcoming impossible odds. The galaxy finally understood what truly made a death world dangerous. It wasn't the environment, it was what that environment created. The team reached the summit ridge as dawn approached. They established overwatch positions overlooking the fortress interior. Voran patrols moved along predetermined routes below. Security systems focused outward rather than inward. The defenders never considered the possibility of infiltration from above. Their complacency created critical vulnerabilities. Clark gave the execute order at 0615. Demolition teams moved simultaneously against 12 targets. They placed charges on primary power relays and communication nodes. The attacks were perfectly synchronized to maximize confusion. Voran defenders responded to multiple crises at once. their command structure fragmented under the coordinated assault. The fortress's automated systems began failing within minutes. Emergency power engaged but couldn't compensate for the damage. Defense turrets went offline as primary energy conduits severed. Communication arrays emitted emergency distress signals. The Voran commander lost contact with his subordinate units. The impregnable fortress was suddenly blind and vulnerable. This unconventional approach achieved what Federation technology could not. The humans had turned the fortress's greatest strength into its fatal weakness. Their willingness to attempt the impossible created opportunities where none should have existed. The battle's momentum shifted in those decisive minutes. The Voran were learning that some enemies couldn't be analyzed or predicted. Lieutenant Martinez moved through the fortress corridors at a steady run. His breathing remained controlled despite the rising heat. The reactor chamber lay beyond 3 security bulkheads that should have been sealed. His team had disabled the emergency protocols during their infiltration. Warning lights flashed crimson along the ceiling. Alarms echoed through the metal passageways. He carried enough explosives to collapse the entire mountain sector. The mission required destruction of the primary power core. This would disable the fortress's shields and weapons simultaneously. There was no way to accomplish this remotely or from a safe distance. The explosive yield needed for guaranteed success exceeded any timer-based deployment. Someone had to remain on site to detonate the charges manually. Martinez had volunteered without hesitation during the briefing. He reached the reactor chamber as emergency containment fields engaged. The air shimmered with heat distortion from the uncontrolled core. Radiation levels were already approaching lethal thresholds. His protective suit could provide minutes at most. He began placing charges at the structural weak points identified during planning. Each magnetized explosive clamped to the glowing metal surfaces. He opened a channel to Captain Clark as he finished the final placement. The connection was unstable through the interference. His voice remained calm as he reported mission status. He confirmed all charges were set and ready for detonation. He did not request extraction or discuss alternatives. The communication was strictly operational until the final seconds. Then his tone shifted. He asked Clark to relay a message to his family back on Earth. He spoke briefly about watching sunsets from their porch. He mentioned his daughter's upcoming birthday. There was no talk of glory or recognition. His words were simple and personal. The transmission ended with static as radiation overwhelmed the signal. He triggered the detonation sequence manually. The explosives fired in precise sequence along the core housing. The initial blasts fractured the containment vessel. Secondary charges directed the energy release downward into the mountain's foundation. The entire fortress shook as structural supports failed. Power grids went dark across the facility. Defense towers lost energy and stopped firing. Shield generators emitted failure warnings. Communication arrays went silent as backup systems failed. Voran soldiers looked up as the artificial lighting died. Their command structure dissolved in the sudden chaos. Orders stopped coming through their implants. The organized defense became fragmented and confused. Human forces pressed their advantage immediately. They advanced through the darkness using night vision equipment. Voran units began surrendering as their position became untenable. Some attempted to fight on but were quickly overwhelmed. The loss of central command destroyed their coordination. Resistance crumbled without direction or support. Commander Zeox emerged from his bunker with hands raised. He offered unconditional surrender to the nearest human officer. His face showed disbelief at the situation. He had expected to defeat a superior Federation fleet, not be captured by primitive invaders. His pride was broken along with his fortress. This single act achieved what entire fleets could not. The Voran command structure collapsed across the planet. Their forces surrendered or retreated without coordination. The technological advantage they had relied upon became irrelevant. One man's willingness to die had changed the course of the battle. It demonstrated a level of commitment the Voran could not comprehend. Their military doctrine had no counter for such sacrifice. They calculated odds and probabilities, but not conviction. This failure in their understanding cost them the campaign. The myth of Voran invincibility ended in that reactor chamber. Galactic warfare would never be the same after this day. Victory reports traveled at light speed through Federation communication networks. The data showed 53 Voran warships destroyed or captured. Ground forces had surrendered across 3 continents. Military analysts struggled to process the information. Their projections had indicated certain human defeat. The actual outcome defied all tactical simulations and probability models. Every assumption about combat effectiveness required re-evaluation. The Galactic Federation Council convened an emergency session. Delegates sat in silence as casualty reports appeared on displays. They had dismissed the human intervention as irrelevant. Now they faced a comprehensive strategic miscalculation. Their reputation for military superiority was permanently damaged. Member worlds began questioning the entire security framework. Trust in centralized command structures eroded within hours. Elder Zareth appeared before them via hologram from the rebuilt Zalani capital. Her image showed the still smoking ruins of New Harmony behind her. She spoke without notes or preparation. Her voice carried the weight of recent suffering. She described the 4 days of human intervention in precise detail. Her testimony was measured and factual without emotional embellishment. She recounted how human ships arrived without demands or conditions. Their personnel fought alongside Zalani defenders from the first hours. They shared limited supplies with civilians without hesitation. Medical teams treated wounded regardless of species. Soldiers positioned themselves between Varan forces and sheltering families. These actions continued through constant bombardment and ground assaults. She emphasized that humans sought no territory or resources. They accepted no offers of payment or compensation. Their intervention was based solely on perceived need. They operated under a different ethical framework than Federation protocols. This framework prioritized immediate action over procedural correctness. It valued lives over political considerations. The Federation's advanced technology had remained unused during the crisis. Their ships stayed in dock while humans fought with inferior equipment. Their weapons were irrelevant without deployment orders. Their sensors provided perfect information without resulting in action. This contrast became painfully clear during her testimony. She concluded with a simple observation. True strength was not measured in firepower or shielding technology. It was measured in willingness to protect others at personal cost. Humans demonstrated this through concrete actions rather than rhetorical commitments. Their example shamed the Federation's inaction. It redefined the galactic understanding of power dynamics. Council members remained silent after her transmission ended. Some avoided looking at their colleagues. Others studied the tactical displays showing human ship movements. The strategic implications were becoming clear. A new power had emerged that operated outside their established frameworks. This power was based on different values and priorities. The human victory demonstrated that technological superiority was not decisive. Determination and adaptability could overcome massive material disadvantages. This realization threatened the foundation of Federation military doctrine. Their entire security strategy required fundamental re-examination. The balance of power had shifted in ways they couldn't yet calculate. The second human ship fired armor-piercing rounds at the escort's engine housing. The projectiles penetrated the outer hull and detonated inside the propulsion section. Atmosphere vented from multiple breaches as internal explosions rocked the vessel. The Varan ship lost power and began drifting uncontrollably. Small fighter craft emerged from the human freighter's cargo bays. These were modified atmospheric vehicles with minimal space combat capability. They lacked energy weapons or advanced targeting systems. Their strategy relied on numbers and unpredictable maneuvers. Dozens of small craft swarmed around the larger Voran ships. Voran targeting computers struggled to track the numerous small contacts. Their weapons were designed for engaging capital ships at long range. The swarm tactics created confusion and disrupted formation integrity. Several Voran vessels collided while attempting to evade the chaotic attacks. Human gunners continued firing kinetic rounds at vulnerable points. They targeted shield generators and weapon emplacements with precision strikes. The solid projectiles caused catastrophic damage when they struck critical systems. Voran engineers had never designed their ships against such primitive weaponry. The battle became a close-range engagement favoring human adaptability. Their small craft weaved through weapons fire while drawing attention from the freighters. Morrison's ships advanced steadily toward the planet's atmosphere. They ignored damaged Voran vessels that no longer posed immediate threats. Their objective remained reaching the surface where they were needed most. Voran command channels filled with conflicting damage reports and tactical updates. Their commanders had no contingency for this type of engagement. Standard protocols assumed technological superiority would decide any confrontation. The humans had introduced variables their doctrine didn't account for. The human dropships descended through atmospheric chaos. Plasma trails crisscrossed the sky where Varan fighters maintained air superiority. The landing craft were civilian models with minimal armor plating, their engines strained under the unfamiliar gravity and turbulent conditions. Soldiers inside checked their equipment with methodical precision. Their gear was standard infantry loadouts without specialized environmental protection. They established perimeter security the moment ramps lowered. Teams moved through burning streets where Zalani civilians sheltered in ruined buildings. Varan patrols operated with predictable sweep patterns. Human squads used rubble and collapsed structures for concealment. Their movements were economical and deliberate. Every advance was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Rifle teams engaged Varan armor at close ranges. Their projectiles were simple metal slugs propelled by chemical explosives. Varan energy shields dispersed directed energy attacks effectively, but struggled against kinetic impact. Sustained rifle fire created stress fractures in armor plating. Concentrated fire on joint areas produced mobility kills. The Varan had no doctrine for combating projectile weapons. Medics established aid stations in unstable buildings. Nancy Foster treated Zalani civilians with shrapnel wounds and radiation burns. She worked while plasma fire impacted nearby structures. Her medical kit contained basic trauma supplies and emergency surgery tools. She prioritized patients by severity of injury rather than species or military value. Varan patrols occasionally targeted medical markings on her uniform. Human soldiers displayed unnatural endurance under fire. Wounded personnel continued fighting after receiving field treatment. Private Walsh maintained his position with a fractured arm and torso burns. He relayed targeting data until losing consciousness. His squad completed the engagement before evacuating him. This persistence confused Varan tactical analysts. Varan commanders expected orderly withdrawal under heavy resistance. Their opponents instead intensified pressure when taking casualties. Human teams used suppressive fire to pin better-equipped forces. They advanced during reload cycles and tactical pauses. Their movements appeared unpredictable but followed clear tactical logic. Varan communication showed increasing frustration. The Varan were accustomed to opponents who valued self-preservation. Human behavior violated their combat psychology models. Soldiers deliberately drew fire to expose enemy positions. Teams sacrificed advancement opportunities to protect civilian groups. These actions made no tactical sense by conventional analysis. Varan Command began questioning their intelligence assessments. Ground forces reported unusual physiological resilience. Humans continued operating with injury levels that would incapacitate other species. Their pain tolerance exceeded documented norms. Medical teams noted accelerated clotting and shock resistance. These traits were undocumented in Federation biological databases. Varan morale diminished as engagements continued. Their technological advantage yielded diminishing returns. Human adaptability neutralized their tactical superiority. Commanders requested additional resources, but received only static about unexpected fleet losses overhead. The ground campaign was stalling against seemingly inferior forces. The willingness to accept losses became a tactical multiplier. Human teams achieved objectives through persistence rather than technology. They maintained pressure through constant harassment and unpredictable maneuvers. Varan forces began consolidating rather than expanding their perimeter. The initiative had shifted to the invaders. Captain Clark studied the Varan fortress through high-powered binoculars. The structure rose from the mountain like a metal spike driven into rock. Its walls were smooth polished alloy that reflected the fading sunlight. Defense turrets covered every approach with overlapping fields of fire. Sensor arrays swept the surrounding area continuously. The design was flawless for repelling conventional assaults. Federation tactical databases listed such fortresses as unbreachable. Standard doctrine called for orbital bombardment or siege tactics. Both options were impossible given the Varan fleet presence and time constraints. Clark's team had neither heavy weapons nor air support. Their equipment consisted of basic climbing gear and demolition charges. The mission parameters defied all established military logic. Clark divided his team into 3 groups. The first would scale the eastern cliff face under cover of darkness. The second would create distractions near the main entrance. The third remained in reserve for emergency extraction. Each climber carried 50 kilograms of equipment including oxygen tanks and thermal blankets. The ascent would take approximately 6 hours if everything went perfectly. They began climbing at 0200 local time. The rock face was volcanic granite with minimal handholds. Team members used pitons and grappling hooks to gain elevation. Wind speeds increased at higher altitudes, threatening to tear them from the wall. They communicated through hand signals and low-power radios. Progress was measured in centimeters per minute. Varan sensors detected no movement on the cliff. Their systems were calibrated for vehicles and energy signatures. The slow manual climb fell below detection thresholds. Patrols focused on established approach routes and landing zones. No guards were posted on the sheer vertical surfaces. The defenders considered the terrain sufficient protection. The climbing team identified structural weaknesses invisible to scanners. They noted stress fractures from seismic activity and thermal expansion. Their route took them past ventilation shafts and maintenance conduits. These openings were too small for automated defense systems but accessible to humans. They marked each potential entry point for later exploitation. Demolition experts placed charges at calculated intervals. They targeted power conduits and structural support points. The explosives were configured for directional blasts to minimize collateral damage. Each team member carried enough munitions for one primary and one secondary objective. There were no extras for mistakes or miscalculations. Elder Zareth's words circulated through diplomatic channels. They reached every member world and allied government. The message was clear. Courage mattered more than capability. Sacrifice defined strength more than firepower. This concept would reshape galactic politics for generations. The Federation's moral authority had been permanently diminished by its inaction. 3 months after the battle, Captain Morrison stood before a polished black wall on Kepler 442b. It rose 20 meters high and stretched 100 meters long. The surface was covered with thousands of names engraved in precise columns. Each one represented a human who died during the intervention. Sunlight reflected off the smooth stone as Zalani caretakers maintained the surrounding garden. Elder Zarath approached from the memorial pathway. Her movements were slower now, weighted by recent events. She studied the names for a long moment before speaking. Her question was simple and direct. She asked if Morrison regretted the cost of their intervention. Her voice carried genuine concern rather than formal politeness. Morrison didn't look away from the wall. His eyes tracked across the names of people he had commanded. He remembered their faces and voices from briefings and combat situations. Some were professional soldiers. Others were civilian volunteers who chose to come. He considered her question carefully before answering. He said without them, her species would be extinct. The Varan occupation would have completed its objectives. There would be no Zalani civilization left to remember or mourn. The cost was measured against that certain outcome. His tone was factual rather than emotional. He presented it as a simple equation. He felt no regret for their decision to intervene. He expressed respect for those who made the choice to participate. Every person on that wall had volunteered knowing the risks. They understood the technological disadvantage and tactical challenges. Their sacrifice was conscious and deliberate. This distinction mattered to him. The Galactic Federation had transmitted an official offer that morning. They proposed full membership and a permanent council seat for humanity. The terms included access to advanced technology and shared defense commitments. It represented the most rapid diplomatic elevation in their history. The same species they had dismissed as primitive now held veto power. Earth's role in galactic affairs shifted immediately. They became protectors for worlds without military capability. Their ships began patrolling vulnerable sectors near Voron space. Other species requested defense agreements outside Federation channels. Humanity consistently responded without preconditions or lengthy negotiations. This redefined the concept of leadership among starfaring civilizations. Power was no longer measured by technological advancement alone. The willingness to act became the new standard for authority. Species began evaluating allies based on reliability rather than firepower. The political landscape transformed within weeks. Humanity's Deathworld origin became their defining characteristic. Their resilience was now recognized as strategic strength. Other civilizations studied their history of overcoming adversity. The constant threats of their homeworld had forged unique capabilities. These traits could not be replicated through technology alone. The memorial wall stood as permanent proof of their commitment. It demonstrated that some values were worth dying for. This concept was unfamiliar to most advanced civilizations. They had evolved beyond such primitive sacrifices. Now they had to reconsider their entire ethical framework. Morrison finally turned from the wall. He nodded to Elder Zareth and walked toward his waiting ship. New reports were coming in from the frontier. Another world needed help. His crew was already preparing for departure. The memorial would remain as others continued the work. Commander Zeok stood in what remained of his command center. The room was littered with broken consoles and melted wiring. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the scarred metal walls. He had ordered his staff to surrender 30 minutes earlier. Now he waited alone for the human commander. His uniform was torn and stained with coolant fluid. The air smelled of ozone and burnt insulation. Captain Clark entered through the blown doorway. His combat gear showed recent damage and repairs. He carried a standard infantry rifle slung across his chest. His movements were economical and watchful. He stopped 3 meters from the Voran commander. His expression was neutral, without triumph or aggression. He simply waited. Zeox offered his sidearm across open palms. The gesture was formal and precise. His voice was steady but hollowed out. He stated his name and rank. He declared the unconditional surrender of all Voran forces in the Kepler 442b system. He requested terms for his personnel. The words sounded mechanical, rehearsed over centuries of military tradition. He could not comprehend the force that had defeated him. His intelligence reports described primitive technology and limited numbers. He had expected to face Federation warships with superior firepower. Instead, he encountered opponents who refused to acknowledge defeat. Their persistence defied all logical military calculation. His tactical models had no variables for such behavior. His forces were outmaneuvered at every turn. Human teams used terrain he considered impassable. They attacked from directions his sensors couldn't monitor. They continued advancing after taking losses that should have crippled their effectiveness. Their medical teams operated under fire that should have forced retreat. None of it made strategic sense by Voran doctrine. The Voran war logic was built around measurable factors. They calculated firepower ratios and shield efficiency. They analyzed technological advantages and resource limitations. Their entire military philosophy was based on quantifiable superiority. Human actions introduced unquantifiable elements. Courage and sacrifice couldn't be measured in their equations. Their doctrine failed against Deathworld resilience. Humans fought with injuries that would incapacitate Voran soldiers. They maintained cohesion under pressure that should cause panic. Their decision-making remained effective in chaos that should create paralysis. These traits were undocumented in any intelligence database. Zeox realized they came from evolutionary adaptation rather than training. His surrender signaled the end of an era in galactic warfare. The Voran Empire had dominated through technological supremacy for centuries. Their ships and weapons were the most advanced in known space. They believed superiority came from better engineering and more powerful systems. This engagement proved that determination could overcome even the greatest technological advantage. Galactic warfare would never be the same after this defeat. Other species would study human tactics and adaptability. They would recognize that technology alone wasn't decisive. The balance of power had shifted toward those willing to endure and sacrifice. Military doctrine across civilizations would require complete revision. The rules had changed in ways no one could yet fully understand. Zeox remained standing at attention. His pride was shattered, but his discipline remained. He had commanded the most powerful fleet in Voran history. Now he surrendered to a commander whose ship should have been easily destroyed. The lesson would echo through military academies for generations. Sometimes the primitive response was the only one that mattered. Medic Nancy Foster worked in what remained of a Zilani processing plant. The roof was partially gone from plasma strikes. Support beams sagged under damaged structures. She had set up her aid station between 2 broken conveyor belts. The floor was slick with water from a ruptured cooling line. Her medical supplies were laid out on a stained tarp. Everything was organized for rapid access under combat conditions. Plasma fire continued outside the shattered walls. Voran patrols moved through adjacent streets. Their energy weapons flashed through the broken windows. Foster didn't pause her work when nearby explosions shook the building. She was treating a Zilani child with second-degree burns. Her movements were methodical and precise. She applied burn gel and sterile bandages without hesitation. Her medical kit contained basic trauma supplies. There were tourniquets, compression bandages, and emergency airway tubes. The equipment was decades behind Federation standards. It lacked advanced diagnostics or automated treatment systems. Everything required manual application and constant monitoring. Her training emphasized rapid assessment and intervention under fire. Voran forces began targeting the area with mortar fire. Explosions walked closer to the processing plant. Shrapnel pinged against the exterior walls. Foster's assistants looked toward the doorway nervously. She continued suturing a deep laceration on a Zalani elder. Her focus remained entirely on her patient. She ordered the assistants to continue their tasks. Federation medical doctrine required evacuation under such conditions. Their protocols prioritized caregiver safety and equipment preservation. Standard procedure called for orderly withdrawal to secure positions. Human medics operated under different principles. They considered patient abandonment unacceptable regardless of risk. This difference in philosophy became starkly apparent. Voran scouts eventually reached the plant entrance. They moved cautiously through the damaged doorway. Their weapons were raised and scanning for threats. They expected to find medical personnel retreating or surrendering. Instead, they found Foster administering blood expanders to a critical patient. Her sidearm remained holstered and unused. The Voran hesitated at the unexpected scene. They were trained to combat soldiers, not medical personnel treating civilians. Their tactical programming didn't account for this scenario. Foster ignored their presence completely. She continued her work as if they weren't standing there armed. This defiance confused their combat algorithms. She eventually looked up from her patient. She pointed toward the wounded Zalani lining the walls. Her expression showed no fear or aggression. She simply returned to her work without another glance. The Voran soldiers withdrew slowly. They didn't understand what they were witnessing. Their reports described irrational behavior patterns. Human medical teams saved thousands who would have died under standard protocols. Their willingness to remain under fire made the difference. Voran forces eventually stopped targeting medical stations. They couldn't comprehend the commitment they were facing. This small mercy saved countless lives in the final days. The medical frontline proved as decisive as any battlefield victory. It demonstrated courage without weapons or armor. This aspect of human intervention became legendary among the Zalani. They remembered the medics who refused to leave them. This commitment shaped post-war relations more than any military success. It showed that protection meant more than just defeating enemies. The Voran fleet positioned itself for standard naval engagement. Their destroyers formed precise battle lines with overlapping shield coverage. Cruisers maintained optimal firing distances for their energy weapons. Command ships coordinated from safe positions behind the main force. Their tactical displays showed 3 human vessels approaching at combat speed. The Voran expected a conventional exchange of long-range fire. Their systems were optimized for this type of warfare. Hundreds of small craft emerged from the human freighters. They poured from modified cargo bays and external docking clamps. These were not dedicated military fighters but improvised combat vehicles. Many were retrofitted mining skiffs and maintenance pods. Their hulls lacked proper armor or advanced shielding. Weapons appeared to be manually aimed and operated. The entire swarm looked like a disorganized crowd rather than a military formation. Voran targeting systems attempted to acquire the incoming contacts. Their computers struggled with the sheer number of small objects. Each craft presented a minimal sensor signature. The swarm moved in unpredictable patterns without formation discipline. Targeting locks failed repeatedly as ships changed velocity and direction. The Voran fire control officers switched to manual targeting. They couldn't maintain track on individual craft. The human swarm closed distance rapidly. They ignored standard evasion patterns and approach vectors. Their movements appeared chaotic but followed underlying logic. Groups of craft would suddenly converge on single targets. They used numerical superiority to overwhelm point defense systems. Voran energy weapons fired continuously but achieved few kills. Kinetic weapons began impacting Voran shields. The human craft fired solid projectiles rather than energy beams. These impacts created localized stress on shield generators. Multiple simultaneous hits caused harmonic feedback loops. Shield integrity fluctuated wildly across the Voran formation. Some sections failed entirely under the constant barrage. The battle descended into close-range chaos. Human craft swarmed around larger Voran vessels like insects. They attacked sensor arrays and weapon emplacements directly. Their primitive weapons proved effective at point-blank range. Voran command ships lost communication with their escorts. Formation discipline broke down as captains acted independently. Voran tactical doctrine had no response for this type of engagement. Their training emphasized orderly fleet maneuvers and coordinated fire. The swarm tactics created confusion and disorganization. Commanders couldn't issue effective orders in the chaotic environment. Their technological advantage became irrelevant at such close ranges. The human adaptability proved decisive. Pilots modified tactics in real time based on Voran responses. They identified weaknesses in shield coverage and targeting blind spots. Damaged craft would ram vulnerable areas when unable to continue fighting. This willingness to sacrifice individual units increased the swarm's effectiveness. Voran losses mounted rapidly despite their superior technology. Destroyers found themselves isolated and surrounded. Cruisers took damage from multiple directions simultaneously. The swarm seemed to learn and adapt faster than their systems could respond. Within hours, the Voran fleet was reduced to scattered remnants trying to disengage. This engagement demonstrated that numerical superiority could overcome technological advantage. The swarm tactics exploited limitations in advanced targeting systems. They turned the Voran's own precision against them. The lesson would change galactic naval doctrine permanently. Future battles would need to account for asymmetric warfare approaches. The era of pure technological dominance had ended. Elder Zarath reached the quantum transmitter as the ceiling rained dust and debris. Her city was burning on all sides. The device hummed with stored energy, its crystalline structure pulsing with soft blue light. This was their final option after conventional communications failed. She input the emergency broadcast sequence with trembling fingers. The console displayed targeting coordinates for 53 recipient worlds. Each one represented a civilization capable of intervention. The transmission contained raw sensor data and visual records. It showed Voran warships in attack formations, plasma beams cutting through residential districts, civilians being rounded up by armored soldiers. The data package included tactical analysis of Voran weaknesses and Zilani defense capabilities. It was a comprehensive plea for military assistance from a species facing extinction. The message concluded with a simple text component. "We are dying. Please help us." Federation receiving stations acknowledged the signal within minutes. Their systems automatically routed it to diplomatic channels. Legal advisors immediately began analyzing jurisdictional issues. They debated whether the Zilani qualified for protection under interstellar treaties. Some argued the Voran might have legitimate claims to the system. Others expressed concern about setting intervention precedents. The discussion continued for hours without resolution. The Altarian delegation received the transmission through secure channels. Their philosophical council reviewed the data with detached interest. They noted the violence and suffering with clinical precision. Their response cited centuries of pacifist doctrine. They expressed regret but stated they could not participate in military action. Their message included offers of humanitarian aid once hostilities ceased. It provided no immediate relief for the ongoing assault. The Crystalline Collective processed the signal through their logic networks. Their systems analyzed the request against core programming directives. The conclusion was inevitable. They could not violate their fundamental prohibition against violence. Their response explained this limitation in precise technical terms. They offered to send medical drones after the conflict ended. The transmission ended with expressions of sympathy, but no commitment to act. The Voran fortress rose from the mountain like a metal spike driven into stone. Its polished alloy walls reflected sunlight with mirrored perfection. Automated defense turrets covered every approach angle with overlapping fields of fire. Sensor arrays swept the surrounding terrain continuously. Federation tactical databases classified such structures as unbreachable by conventional means. Standard doctrine required orbital bombardment or prolonged siege tactics. The Voran engineers had anticipated every established military approach. Captain Clark studied the fortress through high-powered binoculars. His team had no heavy weapons or air support. Their equipment consisted of basic climbing gear and demolition charges. The mission parameters defied all standard military logic. He identified the eastern cliff face as their entry point. It was nearly vertical and offered minimal handholds. Voran sensors were calibrated for vehicles and energy signatures, not slow manual ascent. The climbing team began their ascent under cover of darkness. They moved with deliberate slowness to avoid detection. Pythons and grappling hooks provided temporary anchor points. Wind speeds increased at higher elevations, threatening to tear them from the rock face. They communicated through hand signals and low-power radios. Progress was measured in centimeters per minute. The climb would require 6 hours if everything proceeded perfectly. They identified structural weaknesses invisible to scanners. Stress fractures from seismic activity marked potential demolition points. Ventilation shafts and maintenance conduits offered alternative entry routes. These openings were too small for automated defense systems but accessible to humans. The team marked each location for later exploitation. Voran patrols focused on established approaches, never considering vertical infiltration. Demolition experts placed charges at calculated intervals. They targeted power conduits and structural support points. The explosives were configured for directional blasts to minimize collateral damage. Each team member carried enough munitions for one primary objective. There were no extras for mistakes or miscalculations. The placement required perfect precision to achieve the desired effect. The team reached the summit ridge as dawn approached. They established overwatch positions overlooking the fortress interior. Voran patrols moved along predetermined routes below. Security systems focused outward rather than inward. The defenders never considered the possibility of infiltration from above. Their complacency created critical vulnerabilities that humans immediately exploited. Clark gave the execute order at 6:15 hours. Demolition teams moved simultaneously against 12 key targets. They placed charges on primary power relays and communication nodes. The attacks were perfectly synchronized to maximize confusion. Voran defenders responded to multiple crises at once. Their command structure fragmented under the coordinated assault. The fortress's automated systems began failing within minutes. Emergency power engaged but couldn't compensate for the damage. Defense turrets went offline as primary energy conduits severed. Communication arrays emitted emergency distress signals. The Voran commander lost contact with subordinate units. The impregnable fortress was suddenly blind and vulnerable. Lieutenant Martinez completed the final phase alone. He reached the reactor chamber as emergency containment fields engaged. Radiation levels were already approaching lethal thresholds. He placed the remaining charges at structural weak points. His detonation sequence collapsed the core containment vessel. Secondary explosions severed the mountain's foundation. The entire fortress shuddered as structural supports failed. This unconventional approach achieved what Federation technology could not. The humans had turned the fortress's greatest strength into its fatal weakness. Their willingness to attempt the impossible created opportunities where none should have existed. The battle's momentum shifted in those decisive minutes. The Voran were learning that some enemies couldn't be analyzed or predicted. Their technological superiority meant nothing against opponents who refused to acknowledge impossibility. The Galactic Federation offered humanity full membership with a permanent council seat. The invitation came 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b. Their terms included technology sharing and mutual defense commitments. Humanity accepted without hesitation or lengthy negotiation. The same species once dismissed as primitive now held veto power. Their transition from observer to decision-maker occurred within a single planetary rotation. The council chamber felt different with human representatives present. They occupied seats previously reserved for technologically advanced civilizations. Other delegates adjusted to their straightforward manner of speaking. Human diplomats focused on practical solutions rather than procedural debates. They consistently prioritized action over deliberation. This approach disrupted centuries of political tradition. Humanity's role shifted immediately to protector of vulnerable worlds. They established rapid response protocols for distress calls. Their ships began patrolling sectors near former Voran territory. Weaker species requested bilateral defense agreements outside Federation channels. Humanity consistently responded without preconditions or bureaucratic delays. This redefined expectations for galactic leadership. The Zilani cemented this new social contract through permanent alliance. They granted humans basing rights and resource access. Their reconstruction efforts incorporated human engineering techniques. Cultural exchanges emphasized shared values rather than technological differences. The Zilani never forgot who answered when others hesitated. Their loyalty became the foundation of the new order. Earth's Deathworld legacy transformed into strategic advantage. Their evolutionary resilience became the galaxy's shield. Federation analysts studied human perseverance as a defensive asset. Military doctrines incorporated psychological factors alongside technological specifications. The definition of power expanded beyond firepower and shielding. Resilience and adaptability entered strategic calculations. The Federation's understanding of strength was permanently altered. They witnessed technology fail where human will succeeded. Advanced weapons meant nothing without the courage to use them. Safety and comfort had eroded their capacity for sacrifice. Humans demonstrated that true power required willingness to bear costs. This realization transformed their political and military frameworks. Humanity redefined moral authority through consistent action. They measured leadership by protection provided rather than resources controlled. Their decisions prioritized vulnerable populations over strategic advantages. This values-based approach influenced other council members. Debates began focusing on ethical imperatives rather than procedural objections. The political landscape shifted toward substantive rather than formal power. The willingness to die for strangers became the highest currency. This concept was foreign to most advanced civilizations. They had evolved beyond such primitive sacrifices. Now they recognized it as the ultimate expression of commitment. Trust between species was measured by demonstrated sacrifice rather than treaty language. Alliances became stronger and more reliable. Human ships maintained constant patrols along the frontier. Their presence deterred aggression against weaker worlds. The Voran surrender had established a new deterrent effect. Potential aggressors now calculated human response into their plans. This protective umbrella allowed smaller civilizations to develop without constant threat. Galactic stability increased despite the ongoing military presence. The new order was not without controversy. Some species resented the rapid shift in power dynamics. Others questioned human methods and decision-making processes. But none could deny the results. Attacks on vulnerable worlds decreased significantly. Response times to crises improved dramatically. The galaxy had found its protectors in the most unexpected place. Humanity's influence extended beyond military matters. Their cultural values began shaping interstellar relations. Concepts like mutual protection and unconditional aid gained prominence. The Federation became more proactive in preventing conflicts. Their focus shifted from managing crises to preventing them. This represented a fundamental evolution in galactic governance. The Death World had become the conscience of known space. Its people provided what technology could not: unwavering commitment to justice. Their example reminded the galaxy that advanced civilizations must never lose their courage. True progress required retaining the will to defend others. The human legacy would endure long after their technology matched others. The galaxy discovered that strength isn't forged in labs or shipyards, but in the will to stand between danger and those who cannot defend themselves. Remember that lesson when you hear sophisticated societies claim they always know better. Advanced technology means little next to raw courage. The most powerful responses are often the simplest. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest. And sometimes the primitive answer is the only one that matters. Not because it's simple, but because it's true. The Galactic Federation received their desperate plea. 53 worlds heard it. Only one responded. While advanced civilizations debated ethics and risk, 3 human ships were already burning toward a battle that would redefine galactic power. Their technology was centuries behind. Their tactics were primitive. But they had one thing the Federation forgot: the will to die for strangers. The peaceful world of Kepler 442b knew no sharp edges. The Zilani cultivated their glowing fruit trees in harmony with gentle climates and mild seasons. Each city was a carefully planned network of soft-lit pathways where citizens moved without haste. Their entire civilization had evolved without predators or natural disasters. Conflict was a historical concept studied in archives, not a present reality. The first warning came as a shadow falling across their capital. Atmospheric sensors registered massive objects entering orbit. A dozen Voran warships deployed from jump points without transmission or identification. Their hulls were angular and dark, bristling with weapon ports. Zilani defense forces had no protocol for this scenario. Their orbital platforms were strictly for monitoring weather patterns. Plasma fire began without declaration of war. The first strikes targeted communication hubs and power distribution centers. Energy beams cut through crystalline structures that had stood for millennia. Civilians looked up to see their sky burning, the air filled with the scent of ozone and vaporized metal. Elder Zerath reached the quantum transmitter chamber as the ceiling trembled. She input the emergency broadcast sequence with steady hands. Her city was collapsing around the transmission tower. The message was simple: a request for aid, coordinated with planetary defense schematics and Voran ship signatures. She sent it toward every civilization with receiver capability. The Voran assault continued with methodical precision. They incinerated food storage facilities and water purification plants. Glowing orchards became fields of ash under sustained bombardment. Zalani medical centers overflowed with casualties from the first hours. Defense forces attempted resistance with energy weapons designed for meteor deflection. They were eliminated within minutes. Ground invasion commenced on the second day. Voran dropships deployed armored units into population centers. They herded survivors into containment zones using shock prods and suppression fields. Half the planet's major cities fell under military occupation. Resistance was fragmented and ineffective against professional soldiers. The quantum transmission reached 53 advanced civilizations almost instantly. It contained visuals of cities burning, civilians being captured, and Voran warships maintaining orbital dominance. Each recipient had the capability to intercept and analyze the data stream. Automated systems acknowledged receipt across the galaxy. The Galactic Federation Council received the distress call through normal diplomatic channels. Ambassador Thexmore presented the evidence during an emergency session. He outlined the clear violations of interstellar law and the imminent genocide occurring. The response was not mobilization orders or fleet deployment. Instead, legal advisors began debating jurisdictional boundaries and intervention protocols. They questioned whether the Zalani fell under Federation protection treaties. Some members argued the Voran might have legitimate territorial claims. Others expressed concern about provoking a broader conflict. The debate continued for 12 hours while invasion forces consolidated their control planet-side. No ships were readied. No weapons were powered. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations chose deliberation over action. Their hesitation created a vacuum where entire populations suffered. It revealed a fundamental flaw in their system of values. They had perfected technology but abandoned the courage to use it. This failure would soon become apparent to everyone. Ambassador Thexmore stood before the polished council table where representatives from 53 worlds sat in climate-controlled comfort. He activated the holodisplay showing Voran warships orbiting Kepler 442b. The images showed plasma strikes hitting civilian targets and Zalani being herded into containment zones. His voice remained even as he presented the evidence. He detailed the violations of 17 interstellar treaties. The council chamber was silent except for the hum of environmental systems. The Altarian delegate was the first to respond. She adjusted her silver robe and spoke of their civilization's foundational principles. Her people had renounced violence 3 centuries earlier, after their own planet-wide conflict. She stated they could not participate in any military action regardless of the circumstances. Their philosophical stance was absolute and non-negotiable. She expressed sympathy for the Zalani but offered no practical assistance. The Crystalline Collective's representative emitted a soft glow as it processed the request. Its voice synthesized through translation systems with mechanical precision. It explained that its species was bound by core programming directives that prohibited harming other beings. Even defensive actions against aggressors violated their fundamental code. The delegate noted they could provide humanitarian aid after hostilities ceased. It offered no solution for the immediate crisis. Admiral Cathvar from the Federation's Military Advisory Council studied the tactical readouts. He noted the Voran fleet composition and their established orbital dominance. His analysis concluded that intervention would require significant fleet assets with high probable losses. He stated the Zalani system held no strategic value worth those casualties. His recommendation was to monitor the situation and prepare defensive measures for Federation territories. He dismissed the invasion as a regional conflict. Other military advisors echoed Cathvar's risk assessment. They cited the potential for conflict escalation across multiple sectors. Each representative prioritized their own world security over distant obligations. Some argued that the Zalani should have developed better defenses. Others questioned whether they had provoked the Voran through some undisclosed action. The debate circled through procedural objections and jurisdictional limitations. 12 hours passed without a decision. The council ordered additional intelligence gathering and analysis. They formed subcommittees to study long-term diplomatic solutions. Legal experts debated whether the Zalani qualified for protection under existing treaties. Some members suggested sending observers to document events without intervening. The discussion continued while invasion forces secured another Zilani continent. The Federation's inaction revealed a fundamental flaw in their collective security framework. They possessed the most advanced warships and weapons in known space. Their technology could have ended the invasion within hours, yet they lacked the moral conviction to deploy it. Their societies had grown so accustomed to safety that they forgot how to defend others. They measured risks and resources, but not righteousness. This failure would be recorded in their history as the moment they abandoned their ethical responsibilities. Their hesitation condemned a peaceful species to suffer under occupation. It demonstrated that advanced technology meant nothing without the courage to use it properly. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations chose comfort over compassion. Their inaction created an opportunity for others to prove what true strength looked like. The Zilani distress signal reached the Sol system 37 minutes after transmission. Federation databases labeled it a minor system with primitive technology and minimal spaceflight capability. Their files noted frequent natural disasters and hostile environmental conditions. Human communication arrays detected the quantum transmission through standard monitoring protocols. Automated systems classified it as a priority foreign communication. Captain Jake Morrison received the alert during routine patrol near Mars orbital space. His vessel was a retrofitted exploration ship with limited combat capability. He reviewed the transmission data while his crew monitored sensor readings. The visuals showed cities burning and civilians being captured. Voran warships maintained uncontested orbital dominance. Morrison did not consult command authority or request instructions. He composed a response within 8 minutes of receiving the signal. The message contained no diplomatic formalities or procedural inquiries. It stated simply that assistance was en route and requested current tactical data. His transmission included coordinates for potential landing zones and evacuation points. The language was direct and focused exclusively on operational necessities. 3 human vessels changed course immediately. The Independence, Liberty, and Defiance were converted freighters with basic FTL capability. Their engines were generations behind Federation technology. Navigation computers calculated a 19-hour transit time to Kepler 442b. Engineering teams began modifying cargo holds for potential Shangyuan Yunshu. Federation observers monitoring human communications noted the response with professional curiosity. Their reports highlighted the technological limitations of the intervention force. Human ships lacked energy shielding and advanced targeting systems. Their weapons were primarily kinetic projectile launchers using solid ammunition. Military analysts considered them incapable of engaging modern warships. The human vessels carried mixed crews of military personnel and civilian volunteers. Medical teams assembled trauma kits from available supplies. Engineers modified mining equipment for potential combat applications. There were no discussions about rules of engagement or political consequences. Preparation focused entirely on mission requirements. Command structures operated with minimal hierarchy. Decisions were made at the lowest effective level. Morrison delegated authority to ship captains based on situational awareness. Communication channels remained open for real-time coordination. There were no requests for approval from Earth-based authorities. Federation monitoring stations recorded the 3 ships entering FTL trajectories. Their course was direct and without evasive maneuvers. Signal analysis confirmed they were accelerating beyond recommended safety limits. Engineering telemetry indicated strain on propulsion systems. The humans were pushing their technology beyond designed parameters. Galactic databases listed humanity as an emerging spacefaring species with limited interstellar experience. Their profile noted frequent internal conflicts and resource scarcity. Analysts had previously classified them as marginally capable of self-defense. No report suggested willingness for extraterrestrial intervention. The 3 ships represented a fraction of human naval capability. Their departure left Earth with reduced system security. There were no negotiations for compensation or strategic advantage. The response was unconditional and immediate. This contrasted sharply with Federation protocols requiring council approval and risk assessment. Humanity's action demonstrated a different value calculus. They measured response time in minutes rather than days. They prioritized intervention over deliberation. Their approach shamed the inaction of more advanced civilizations. The galaxy would soon learn that primitive technology could be offset by decisive will. The three ships continued towards certain conflict without hesitation. Ambassador Thexmore stood before the council, 12 hours after the human ships had already departed. He announced that a response had been initiated by the Sol system inhabitants. The chamber fell silent. Delegates exchanged glances of confusion. Their databases classified humans as pre-intervention candidates with minimal technology. The revelation disrupted their procedural expectations. Dexmore, the crystalline envoy, initiated a data pull on human military capabilities. Its systems returned fragmented and incomplete records. Files showed projectile weapons using chemical propulsion. Armor designs utilized hardened alloys rather than energy dispersion fields. Medical technology appeared centuries behind standard galactic practices. The envoy noted significant gaps in tactical doctrine databases. Admiral Cathvar studied the findings with visible amusement. He highlighted human reliance on kinetic impact weapons. His analysis concluded that such primitive arms would fail against modern shielding. He described their ships as retrofitted civilian vessels with minimal combat modifications. His assessment dismissed them as irrelevant to the conflict outcome. Other military advisors nodded in agreement. The Aquatic Federation representative questioned human adaptability to land combat. Their analysis focused on physiological limitations in varied environments. They noted humans lacked natural armor or enhanced sensory capabilities. Medical files showed vulnerability to extreme temperatures and radiation exposure. Their assessment concluded humans were poorly suited for extended planetary operations. Council members expressed concern about unauthorized intervention. Some argued it could escalate the conflict beyond current parameters. Others worried about setting precedents for independent action. Legal experts debated whether humans violated interstellar protocols by responding without consultation. The discussion focused on procedural violations rather than potential outcomes. They reviewed human historical records showing frequent internal conflicts. Database entries described wars over resources and ideological differences. Psychological profiles indicated aggressive tendencies and territorial behavior. Sociological models predicted low cooperation thresholds in stress conditions. Analysts interpreted these as weaknesses rather than adaptations. The Council voted against providing any support to the human effort. They declined to share tactical data or intelligence resources. No member world offered to coordinate with the incoming ships. The decision was unanimous based on risk assessment protocols. They authorized passive observation only through long-range sensors. Their assessment completely missed the evolutionary context. Humans had developed on a high-gravity world with extreme weather patterns. Their biology maintained constant alertness against environmental threats. They had evolved persistence hunting techniques requiring exceptional endurance. Social structures emphasized group protection over individual survival. The Federation viewed technology as the sole measure of capability. They ignored the psychological factors developed through constant adversity. Humans operated with different risk calculations and response thresholds. Their cultural memory included overcoming impossible odds through sacrifice. This blind spot would prove catastrophic to their understanding of the situation. They returned to debating procedural reforms while three ships approached a battle zone. Monitoring stations tracked their progress with academic interest. Analysts prepared reports on expected failure scenarios. No one considered the possibility of human success. The Council's arrogance prevented them from recognizing what was coming. Their databases contained facts but no understanding of Deathworld. Resilience. The three human ships dropped. Out of warp space 12,000 kilometers from Kepler, 442b sensor arrays immediately. Registered 27 Varan warships in high orbit. Their configuration showed heavy cruisers and assault carriers surrounded by smaller escort vessels. The Varan fleet maintained a defensive formation around primary invasion routes. Their energy signatures indicated active shielding and charged weapon systems. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display on his bridge. His three converted freighters were outmassed 200 to 1. Their sensor readings showed the Voran ships had superior acceleration and targeting capabilities. Engineering reports confirmed their own shields would withstand only limited energy weapon impacts. The initial assessment suggested impossible odds. Morrison opened a broadcast channel on all frequencies. His message was brief and unambiguous. He identified his ships as a human relief force responding to the Zelani distress call. He stated their intention to provide medical aid and civilian protection. The transmission contained no threats or ultimatums. It simply declared they would not abandon those in need. Voran command ships detected the incoming vessels through standard monitoring systems. Their initial scans classified the human ships as civilian-grade transport vessels. Weapons analysis showed primitive projectile launchers and minimal defensive systems. Tactical computers calculated negligible threat levels. The invasion commander ordered 2 escort ships to intercept what he considered a minor nuisance. The human ships continued their approach without altering course. Their engines maintained constant acceleration toward the planet. Morrison directed his gunners to target the lead Voran escort's communication arrays. They loaded specialized ammunition designed to penetrate electronic systems. The weapons were simple magnetic accelerators firing solid tungsten projectiles. Voran's shields activated automatically against the incoming projectiles. Their energy fields were optimized for dispersing plasma and laser attacks. The solid rounds passed through the defensive screens with minimal resistance. The first volley struck the escort ship's sensor mast and communication dishes. Damage reports showed critical systems offline within seconds.